Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
Hello and welcome once again to GammaCast. I'm your host Charlie Esser, and with me for the first time is my skinny rich friend. What's your name?
Mozz Manzor.
Mozz.
Hey guys.
Yes, thank you, Mozz. I am so glad to have you here. Tonight we are talking about the episode Metamorphosis, directed by Alan J. Levy, written by Craig Buck and Frank Dandridge. And of course, featuring our very special 80s guest star, Mackenzie Phillips.
Who was amazing.
She was amazing. She was really awesome in this book, in this movie. Episode. That's the word we're looking for. Episode. So Mozz, what we like to do here at GammaCast is give a quick recap of the episode and then give our thoughts on what we're looking for on this. So just to give us our blatant recap, we'll read our thing here. David accidentally befriends a depressed rock star called Lisa Swan, who's being dominated by her manager/sister. We open up with, I gotta say, Necktie Nightmare, which is our recurring theme song in this episode. I really like that song.
It was really good.
Yeah, I would love the single of that. And this is a pretty good episode. This is like all of our very special episodes in one. We get an anti-drug message, an anti-suicide message, as well as a anti-rock and roll message, because the kids today and their rock and roll, it is always dangerous.
For sure.
Yes. Beyond that, we have our Mackenzie Phillips character, Lisa Swan. She's at a concert. The concert gets out of hand. Someone gets injured fairly badly. We get to see that the character Lisa Swan is having some very real issues with suicidal tendencies. And she basically, after the concert, drives her car off the road. Fortunately, this is not 1980 yet, so her manager's sister, who did not have her seatbelt on, is luckily thrown free, because those seatbelts, they're a death trap. Well, that's a recurring theme you're going to see in a lot of these in a lot of these early 80s Hulks or late 70s Hulks, is they get into a car accident and someone is fortunately thrown free because they weren't tied in one of those dastardly seatbelts.
Of course, every single car is an exploding device.
Absolutely, and of course, and this one is no different. Now, David, because he is a hobo at this point, is sleeping by the side of the road at that moment as the car goes off, as luck would have it, and he is able to come rescue Lisa from the burning wreckage, and thusly befriends her, and they get to be he gets to be a part of her entourage. Of course, her other members of her entourage include her sister, who is basically not caring about the dangers of rock and roll. Essentially, I would say that is the argument being put forth here, is that rock and roll is far too dangerous a thing for people to be playing along with. That it inspires a madness in the youth of America.
Or perhaps that it can. That is one side of it. If one is not careful with it, it can lead down that road. And kind of that's the magic that you're always playing with in rock and roll, is walking on that edge.
Excellent take on that. Mozz. I really appreciate that. That's very cool. Yeah, and certainly that is what we're looking at here, because of course, we do see that as our story progresses, we see that Lisa and her band, they've been together for a very long time. They have written a lot of very unique and interesting songs, but of course they have to do, because this is that glam rock transition. So they have these kind of cool ballads and rock songs that are, what is their base, but of course the sister, who's just about making the big show, it's got to, we got to out kiss, and everyone's in the makeup, everyone's got their, Sergeant Kabuki Man NYPD look going, and we have the big gigantic arc lights on the stage, which they're calling the starbursts, which of course, for any comic book fan, it's just pure Kirby crackle. You get these big, and actually, I don't think they actually were using real arc lights. I think they were, which kind of makes sense. I think that was an animated lightning bolt between it. Although it is,
well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if they had the technology back then to have an actual lightning bolt go back and forth, or who knows, maybe they did.
Well, yeah, that's late 1800s technology.
Fair enough.
You know that guy Tesla? You may have heard of him. He invented those things, and they are quite the showstopper, as they say. But of course, Lisa's not into it. But of course, her sister, and what was her sister's name again? Jackie very much is into it. Greg, who is a bit of a, was it Greg or was it? I'm trying to remember now, because I'm seeing the IMDb. I see Greg and I see Ken, but she's got one person who's a member of her entourage who is very much stoned most of the time.
Right.
And he's feeling a little down, because here comes this new guy, David, who isn't stoned, and he's being given all the important jobs, setting up as a roadie, and her other roadie is feeling, yeah, I'm stoned all the time, but I've always been stoned all the time, and you've never had a problem with it up until this moment. It's a little disconcerting, and so of course he decides to give David a little dose, and
I thought that's where the episode got really interesting, because he gives him a dose of sunshine acid, and the thought of a Hulk rampaging on the effects of LSD is pretty exciting.
Oh yeah, well what's interesting, it's very interesting in this, because of course this is where we get into a lot of, they've definitely been probing a lot of the psychological aspects of the Hulk in recent episodes, and what you really see here is the first time where you actually, it's interesting, because at first we get Banner on acid.
Right.
See him. We get a little flashback to last season's opening of Married, where he was doing a lot of hypnotic trance work of confronting the Hulk, and so we get flashbacks to that with him seeing the Hulk. But what's fascinating to me is that when he does Hulk out, the Hulk is still in the trip, and then the Hulk sees Banner. And you actually get to see, for the first time in this series, the Hulk's relationship to Banner. And the Hulk seeing Banner as a threat. And that's very, very new and very different. And that, of course, opens up for a very nice, and aside from the fact that we get our nice little "don't do drugs are bad" message in this, we also are getting a very nice psychological look, which is kind of in its own way maybe kind of undermines that drugs are bad, since if you're really looking at the psychology of David Banner, this is actually a really, really impressive presentation we're getting. We're seeing Banner in this very different light, I would say. And of course, the Hulk's relationship with Banner in this very different light. Now, just prior to this scene, we actually get Jack McGee showing up. Jack McGee is, of course, the Hulk's nemesis throughout this, and we always have this ongoing question of, is Jack McGee a really good reporter that he's always one step ahead of the Hulk, or is he just insanely lucky? And this is one more episode where we have to lean on that whole he's just insanely lucky quality as a reporter for Jack McGee, because of course he does not, as with the last episode where he gets put on a story that's not Hulk related and then the Hulk shows up. It's very fun to see this. Jack McGee, he's in the area, he's chasing the Hulk, gets pushed by his editors onto this story. This is the story of the crazed teens at the rock concert, one of whom got injured and is paralyzed. And Jack McGee has to follow up with Ms. Swan to get her thoughts on it. Jack McGee is always an interesting character in this. This is a very interesting episode in just the sense that, every so often you'll have these episodes where you have to question, did we really need a Hulk? And I think it's a fair question to ask. Did we really need a Hulk in this? Was a Hulk important to this story, or was it just we told a story because we had to do a cross promotion with Mackenzie Phillips, and I
think shows like this always sort of end up being vehicles for telling other stories.
Mm-hmm.
So as a show, it's far more interesting if the stories that you're telling actually have a heart of their own, aside from the fact that the Hulk is in it. So I think this is a good example of how it can do that. It can just be a vehicle for that. And for me, my favorite part was when Mackenzie Phillips is walking up the stage and doing like a dry practice run of her suicide, of her grand gesture.
Yeah.
And that moment where she walks up and they take a good long time with it, I think that was really, really exciting. It was really, really cool.
As I said, I watched these shows all when I was a kid back in the 1970s, and that scene is actually one of the scenes that, as a kid, that resonated with me, and I remembered to this day. And every so often I'll be watching one of these episodes, and I'll go, "Oh wow, that was the scene. That was the one I remembered." And so it's really cool to see that, to see that played out here. Anyway, moving right along. Her planning for the suicide is very impressive and important. And then when we move on to the when she and this and moves as what we get here is, of course, we have Jack McGee show up. Jack McGee try to get in, gets pushed away, but that of course means that he comes back later when the Hulk does have his LSD Hulk out and trashes the studio. And, an interesting point in this, continuity-wise, is at this point, Jack McGee knows that there is someone who turns into the Hulk. He no longer thinks the Hulk is a separate creature. He's aware that someone turns into the Hulk. He does not know that it's David Banner. He does not really know who the guy is. He just knows approximately who he is because, earlier last season, we had the Mystery Man episode where David had amnesia and Jack McGee and him are trapped in the woods together. So it's very interesting when the when Jackie says that she has a man missing and they're trying to figure out everything that's going on. That and Jack McGee says, "What can you tell me about this guy?" And that that's good. I doubt they ever come back to it because unfortunately they were not big on continuity in the 1970s. But we are definitely seeing some continuity grow out of this. After that Hulk out, David meets with Lisa, Mackenzie Phillips again, and of course she's hitting the hooch pretty hard, and talks her into going to see the woman who is paralyzed, and he just and it was not very cathartic for her, and that's what sort of inspires her desire to move to the suicide option. But of course, as she does make that choice when she is on stage, Banner is in the audience, and that, of course, results in him seeking to solve it, which leads to the Hulk out. And a real
the lightning.
Yes, some pretty amazing visuals as the Hulk comes up to save her, and then is sort of fighting. You know, there's always this thing. You know, they don't have supervillains in this universe yet. They don't really get to that until I think later this season. They're gonna start. I think they have him face a voodoo priestess later, and then they also have him fight a proto Hulk later. But up until now, it's really just they have to sort of put an obstacle for the Hulk to fight. They've had him fight a front loader. They've had him fight a car crusher. You know, they've had him fight a lot of interesting things. But this time, fighting the Starburst electric arc light is actually a really great visual. You know, he's like grabbing it and he's like, you know, channeling the electricity out of himself.
It's almost like he gathers it up for a second and then decides to release it.
Exactly. No, go on, yeah.
Oh, and it's like it's kind of a really cool effect where he's just like, it's almost like he's trying to make a point with it, you know? It's like, here, you know, is this what you want? Kind of, you know?
Absolutely. And you know, that is one of the interesting things about the Hulk. You know, one thing we do get back to with the Hulk every so often is that he does remember what it was Banner was doing when he hulked out. And he does remember what's going on.
Yeah, and here's what the interesting thing is for me, and what was so exciting for that moment where he first takes the acid, and you see two different portions of him reacting to it. It's like when he encounters Banner in his little trip, his journey, he desperately wants to get rid of him. He wants to be rid of him. It's almost like he feels like he's trapped, right? Mm-hmm. So does that imply that the heroic actions that the Hulk performs are independent and like just his own, or are they related to how Banner feels about the situation before he turned, or before how Banner feels about these people?
Well, you know, I think, you know, and you can go back and forth on Hulk psychology forever. You know, what I've always said is I think that this is one thing about this show. I think that this show really informs a lot of the later, what you get in the comic books, a lot of the later psychology of the Incredible Hulk that we do see played out in later books and later stories as we're going through these things. In this case, we see, you know, David Banner very much, so what we see is this idea that the Hulk and Banner definitely are just dissociated from each other. As much as Banner sees the Hulk as an alternate person, as a nemesis, so too does the Hulk. And in that sense, you know, the Hulk sees Banner as this impediment to his own ability to be a fully functioning creature. You know, years later, we're going to they did some TV movies of the Hulk, and they have this great moment with where they have him fight Thor. And in that, you know, there's this great thing about, you know, Thor and Don Blake. And unlike in the comic books where Thor becomes Don Blake, they were actually two separate beings. Which, again, something that later in the comic books they actually explore, this idea that Don Blake should be a separate human being from Thor. That, you know, he can't just be a secret identity. He has to be someone. And, you know, Don Blake and Thor are talking, and Thor is telling him, you know, when I'm not here, I'm still around, but I'm in some state, you know, I have no arms, no legs, it's a place of smoke and nothingness. And then when you call me forth, then I am alive again. And it is very, very disturbing to be sent back to that. And in this moment, I'm thinking, like, where does the Hulk go when Banner is not the Hulk?
Oh, that's interesting.
And the idea that he is, you know, because if he is just a part of Banner's mind, then he exists, he's aware, he's always there in the back of Banner's mind, but, you know, he can't come out because Banner is in control until something releases him. And then, of course, once... And, you know, we've seen this in many episodes. You know, we always say, you know, Hulk is a creature of rage. They always describe the Hulk as a creature of rage. But once he's out, he will fight whatever is the immediate threat. But then he starts to calm down, and he's very helpful. He's kind. He can be gentle. He's not always trying to smash things. He only smashes things when something is coming at him. once there was no immediate threat, there was actually, a couple weeks ago there was an episode called Kindred Spirits, where basically, the Hulk is dealing with, or not the Hulk, but Banner is researching this ancient legend of a Hulk among Native Americans. And when he hulks out, and the Hulk runs off, and we just follow the Hulk, and he actually comes across, this old guy whose truck is stuck, and of course the Hulk just lifts his truck out and pushes him out of the mud. And, just what you would do is a very helpful guy, just who had superhuman strength, and you saw a guy struggling with his truck stuck in the mud, he just helps him out. And, it is this idea that the Hulk is not all rage, and the Hulk is not all anger.
So do you think, and pardon my lack of, knowledge of the history of the Hulk, but is it possible to draw the Hulk out via any other emotion?
Well, it's in this concept, and this is a very interesting thing that we get back as we go through these episodes. We see what draws out the Hulk is different. It can be something as simple frustration. Like there's been several episodes where Banner is stuck in traffic, and that's what causes it. Or Banner is dealing with the operator at AT&T, and that's what causes him to Hulk out. It's like really, ridiculous things that cause him to Hulk out. And then there are other times where he's actually physically injured, and he still doesn't Hulk out. So exactly what they say in the title sequence is whenever he becomes angered or outraged, which, suggests that it's actually it's a very gray area, what causes him to Hulk out. And maybe even, and this is always this idea, is that maybe even, it's not even that he hulks out because of something, it's that he's, sort of like we saw in the Avengers, he's just always angry.
Right.
And he does let the Hulk out, and the real trick for Banner is just coming to terms with that fact that he's always angry, and then just letting the Hulk out.
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, where does the Hulk go when Banner is in control? To me, in my head, it was always sort of like this padded room that for whatever psychological trick reason he can't get out of. So the whole time he's just stewing like a pit bull not being fed, And then when a moment arises where Banner's focus is lost for a second, that he can't hold him back because he's so angry and he can't afford that energy to holding him back. Boom, he comes out, and then it's just like, blah,
Absolutely.
And then I think the equally interesting question is what causes Hulk to go back?
Mm-hmm. Well, ostensibly in this series, it is a, it is a metabolic reaction. That once he calms down, once the adrenal effect is worn off, then he's free, and then he sort of winds himself down, and the Hulk goes back and he turns back to Banner. But again, it is again there are other times where we don't always see that happening. Where the Hulk is in that moment of calm and nothing happens. It's one of these things where when you're trying to headcanon a show. Writers don't always put in headcanon when they're doing it. Some do, some don't. So every so often, stuff happens just because it helps the story. And then other times, stuff happens because the writers, no, I wanted this to be the rules of my universe. And it's very hard to tell, especially on a show this old, because what happens is that people do wind up headcanoning, and then later on, the writers look at it and they say, well, we had it behave in this way at that one time when we just had it because it helped the story. We should probably keep it consistent. So it's a very interesting question exactly what results in the Hulk being freed and what causes him to go back. Again, like I said in the Mystery Man episode, there's a great scene where the Hulk basically picks up the sled that Jack was on because Jack has a broken leg in it, and just carries both of them like 20 miles on a run. Just because they had to get away from the fire. And, there's no real immediate threat, but he keeps on being the Hulk until later on when he comes back. And we even see what triggers him to come back, but we know that he ran for a really long time. And speaking of that is one of the things that we don't get in this, I think. I mean, we do get some nice superhuman things when he throws the piano, and of course when he throws the starburst, and of course the actual lightning. So actually, you know what? I guess, yeah, we are getting some good superhuman moments for the Hulk. You know, it's always this thing with this where you're never quite, you know, the Hulk's strength is something that gets variable. You know, is he just as strong as Lou Ferrigno, or does he have real superhuman strength? And at first I was going to say, you know, there wasn't really a lot of stuff that was the Hulk just really showing insane strength. Although when I think about it, you know, when he throws the piano, that when the piano goes through the wall, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I don't know if Lou Ferrigno could do that.
No. Lou Ferrigno probably couldn't do that. But you know, there was a scene like a few episodes ago called The Confession where there's like a big clock tower bell, and he like throws the bell through a cement wall, and then it just keeps on going to land on the street. Like, you know, it's actually that's like where you get a real comic book scene, you know. And then of course here when he's throwing the lightning bolts, that's a very comic book scene too, where you really see that comic book level superhumanity here. So to wrap up the episode, after, you know, the Hulk saves the day, you know, Banner comes back to Mackenzie Phillips. You get a nice voiceover by Mackenzie Phillips saying about how she realized that committing suicide wouldn't have changed anything. The fans would still have been rabid and crazy, and that would not have fixed the problem. So, you know, and so she decides to, you know, essentially make a better choice of how she's going to approach her life and her music. And you know, leaves with Banner on a pretty positive note. All in all, I did really like this episode. For the start of the new season, I really thought it was good. What would be your overall thought on this episode? Was it a good episode? Did you like it?
Oh, I enjoyed it immensely. I thought the idea of peeking behind a little bit the psychology of the relationship between Banner and Hulk was a really a cool opportunity. What I think I wish they would have focused more on was the relationship between Lisa and Jackie. Mm-hmm. I feel like there was so much there to play with. Obviously, you know, older sister, younger sister, who was which, and, you know, who wants to be in control. And that could have been set up as she could have been a more of an enemy that they could have focused on or built that way or presented her that way as the antagonist. I think that I would have liked to have seen more up. But overall, it was a really, really fun episode.
Okay. So, Mozz, would you like to give any social media, if anyone would like to follow you on Twitter or anything like that? Or
yeah, I'm one of those that just has a Facebook. I don't have a Twitter or an Instagram, but Mozz Manzor on Facebook if you want to find me.
Okay, great. And, of course, for me, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way, as our Mozz and Paz once did, at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, @gmail.com. And, of course, you can always follow me on Twitter as I live tweet episodes of The Incredible Hulk every Saturday at 7 o'clock on MeTV at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. Mozz, it was great having you. You've been
It was great to be here.
Yeah, I hope you come back again. As you all may remember from the last episode, Phil, my last fill-in partner does have to go and do other podcasts on the Southgate Media Network. So we are looking for a new permanent co-host or someone like Mozz who can come in whenever he likes. And if Mozz wants to keep on coming back, I am not going to say no to him. So, all right. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us know what you thought of Mozz. Let us know what you thought of me. And Hulk out with us again next week. Have a great night.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.